process and just getting quotes,
Right.
which is something that we do in daily
Right.
Yeah,
work.
Right.
So that was something that we discussed before, because I'm so glad that Nadia brought it up. We wanna make sure that on all the bids that are of any significance, we're getting multiple quotes, even if they are way under 40,000.
Well, they're two different things. Bids are bids. Those are published.
Yeah.
And anything that's over $40,000, and in fact, and you'll see, later on that there's something that's under 40,000. Some things, it just makes sense to get bids for. And the reason is because, you don't there's a broad field of suppliers. You don't necessarily know, or it's not easy to identify just any three to request for quotes. So it's better to just put it out there as a bid. Where you have a smaller group of providers, and there are several products and several industries that fall into that category, everybody knows who the major players are, and you just request quotes and you go with the lowest quote.
So what I was saying is basically the internal procedure should be, and probably is, that anytime that we have like anything over $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, we get some competitive quotes or bids or so, even though the law only requires to go out through a process of established bids or so when we have $40,000.
Just
You
remember-
wouldn't wanna do bids
Well,
for
first of all,
something that's only
I
$5,000.
think you
You're
You're
confusing,
words.
you're
Yeah.
confusing bids with quotes.
Quotes,
Right.
I'm saying quotes or bids.
No,
Whatever.
it's,
They're
it's
two
two
different
different
things.
things, you know, what you're saying, I believe, is that we need to get quotes on things that are of any sort of consequence.
We need a
Which
competitive
we already
process.
do.
Right, and that's when you go out for quotes, that's what it is.
Right, we have to follow local public contracts law. That's what you're saying, what you're suggesting is already required by law. So we comply with the law.
You just don't have to go through a bidding process.
Which is
Right.
time consuming.
And expensive.
And expensive. Okay, the next item, we got two resolutions. One from Englewood Cliffs that was passed, and one from Alpine. They're different, and I'll explain why they're different. First of all, there was talk down in Trenton passing a state law banning development on the cliffs, the Palisades, over a certain height. This is a result of the LG controversy. Englewood Cliffs passed this. Of course, they were the ones that had the controversy. Alpine is in a similar situation than us. We already have zoning laws that would preclude any development on top of the cliffs. However, people can go for variances. And what this state law would do is eliminate the possibility of anybody getting a variance for that space, which I believe is, let's see, it's 2,000 feet. So you're talking about less than a half of a mile from the top of the cliffs. And when you take into account that space in Tenafly is taken up by the Palisades State Park, the Parkway, 9W, and it may in certain areas go beyond 9W as you head westbound, but not very far. And all, with the exception of the nature center area, which you can't build on anyway, everything in this area is 1 acre zoning to begin with, so it really would preclude that. But there are people, environmentalists, that would like our support for, and all this does is basically support this process for this law down in Trenton. Nadia, please.
Could I, before I vote on this or make a decision on it, could I see exactly where that 2,000-foot line comes? Because we do have the Armenian church that is close to 9W that are not, I can't think of anything else that's near to 9W, and how this would impact anything that they may wanna do in the future.
Well, they
So
would,
is this, is it 2,000 feet from the water or the cliffs?
Cliffs.
from the top of the cliffs.
Which is gonna be different depending upon where you measure, obviously they're jagged.
I wonder if we can get that.
Well, I do believe it goes past 9W. It might impact the Armenian church, but the Armenian church at the same time already has the restrictions based on our zoning laws.
I personally, if it's my turn, find pathetic the fact that Englewood Cliffs, after they approved that 5-story, 7-story building, they're putting out an ordinance saying no more than 35 feet. I mean, we did our job, we got our people in, now you make sure that you don't get yours. That's what I, pretty much I see from this, you know, we have our permissions, you get, I find this really, I like much more the resolution that was passed by the Alpine Borough, and I think that we are within already. I don't know if we wanna make a show to say that we're gonna do that, we already have it. I mean, I think that, I find pathetic that
Well,
resolution.
I would agree with you, Max, if we were gonna do a resolution, we would, the copy, or ours would be much closer to Alpines than Englewood Cliffs.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with that, I agree with
I would
Max
agree
on
with
that.
that.
Should we ask Lisette to put something together in the line, along the lines of the Alpine?
Can we also just find out
Yeah.
if the
Yeah.
engineer can do
Yeah,
it,
before
how
we-
far in we're intruding west of 9W?
Okay.
I'm just
And the
very
state
curious.
Lizette find the state legislation, the bill, or
Sure.
whatever it is?
Anne Marie, would you ask Lisette to give us a copy of the proposed state legislation?
Sure.
And who would we ask for the 2,000-foot line?
we just have to find the building. that
Probably,
we build.
the
Engineer?
engineer.
The engineer.
Yeah.
Try to draw it.
Okay. It shouldn't be
So
too
build, what building should we build before we pass the resolution?
Next is the Fister's Pond engineering proposal update.
Oh, my notes.
Uh,
Is there
Can
no public comment this evening?
We had it already.
we had it.
You were late.
We're-
We had it at 7:30.
We actually started late.
We started.
Oh, man.
The agenda said there was gonna be a presentation in the council chamber, which is why we didn't think
Where is that?
that was posted on the website. And therefore, you wouldn't be coming in here till after the normal time.
For tonight?
Yes.
I don't think so. You call that?
I don't know.
Here's my agenda.
No, he's from the website.
Yeah, that's from the website. I'm sure it's on this.
Dan, you were at that pond
Oh,
meeting?
here it is. Yes.
Would you mind taking the lead on this, please?
Yep. So when we first saw the proposal for services for doing the pond project from Mazer, that was if we were gonna go forward, the 72K, if everyone remembers from the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's on the,
Yeah, so
Okay.
the biggest question was, can we just do the sediment testing? And yes, we can. And we can set aside, recommended about $10,000, and that'll give us the scope of the project based on sediment testing.
Right.
Everything else,
Was there any sense that they could come up with the $10,000?
no. They wanted us to take lead on that one.
Mark, please.
I think Max actually had his hand up before I did.
Okay, in advance of this meeting, I met with a few people trying to understand the issue with the ponds and what is going on, what should be done. And there are solutions today regarding the pond, and it's called weed harvesting or so, whereby you have boats or so, it's an equipment that costs about $50-$60. It goes on the lake and cuts and pulls out all the weeds out of the lake. The actual dredging and sedimenting is done only when you have issues with deposit that can be toxic or so, and that is like a last ditch effort you want to do. Starting directly with actually taking probes and so only opens a Pandora box, because if something is found, then the town will be liable, suppose, then to have to do all the dredges removing and stuff like that, which is millions and millions of dollars. And the whole idea over here is to make the pond relivable for the birds or so, and there are methodologies that are much cheaper, and there are specialized firms that work on specific, taking all the weeds out with specific machines, and that's gonna cost much less. We're looking probably $30,000 to $40,000 to get all the weeds out and getting all the ponds reestablished. And it does not create any type of liabilities that we might have if something, find out or is found out over there. So, before we go over there, I would suggest that we go and look at some firms that are specialized in that type of, it's called weed harvesting, and they do that for different ponds, and it's done on a regular basis, and they go and pull out the weeds even 4 feet under the mud, and they then take it out, and then the pond is reestablished as a water, and it's not anymore clogged by all this pond. And there are specialized, we have over here proposals from our engineers, and with all due respect, I don't think that they are specialized in this type of work. And we should look at that type of work.
People you spoke to are specialized in this type of
Well,
work?
they did some research that there are people that, and of course, we can look and we can find out a few firms that can come out and present what do they do in that type of reestablishing the ponds without having to go through this very expensive process.
Okay, well, you bring up an interesting point. I know, like, for example, Greenwood Lake has been harvesting weeds since before I was born, I think, and they never get to the end of it. Dan, I think the councilman brought up something. I think you need to take it back to them. I would be shocked if this process wasn't considered prior to this meeting, and then they decided to do this other thing for whatever reason. But he's entitled to get an answer to that if it wasn't
Yeah, right.
considered. So maybe you could ask them to come to the next work session and be prepared to discuss that. Mark, did you want to add anything?
So, I have a business question to bring up, okay, so whether it's weed harvesting or traditional dredging, everything is going to cost money, of course, and we have a proposal in front of us for $72,000. If we're going to decide to spend a certain amount of money to do preliminary work, does that mean we've decided to spend $1 million to actually do something with preliminary, what we've accomplished preliminarily? So,
No, this would be a baby step, so
Well,
let's say.
let me finish my thought
Yeah.
first. So, my question is though, before we do any baby step to spend some of the money, we have to have some sort of plan to do the whole picture. Because it's almost like, why would we take a baby step if we don't have any idea if we actually have $1 million to back it up with, right?
Well, I think you're right, and I think that they need to present a business plan.
Right, where's the money coming from?
Which is what you're
Right.
suggesting, like, because, first of all, I'm a little bit taken back that they want us to just finance this, even if it's just $10,000, why they wouldn't look for some fundraising to get some of this money. But you're right, if we pay the $10,000 and then the next step is $100,000, or, I think we need to know exactly what they're looking for, and then we
Right.
can give them a sense of whether we're willing to work with them or not.
So that's 2 questions, Dan.
Yeah.
And Dan, why don't you find out when they would be ready to come back and answer those questions? It may not be as soon as the next work session, and we can go ahead and schedule them in.
Yeah, so the baby step for the $10,000, what that would provide, I guess, would be, is it $1 million project? Cause it's not that contaminated, so the dredging is simple, you just dump the soil wherever, it's cause it's clean. Or has pollutants from whatever sources, 9W, oil, petroleum, the nitrates from the fertilizer, whatever it's in there, will it be a $5 million project?
Well, what I heard the councilman say, Max, is that before we spend $10,000, he wants this other process to be considered.
Yeah,
Yep.
and,
So-
Which is a
Why-
valid point, right?
and
it may
before we
be-
open a Pandora box,
Well,
Right.
whether that's the case or not. So we need to know, A, if they considered it, and if not, let them consider it and come back and give us a sense of if it makes sense or why it doesn't. And I would tell you this, Max, Mazer is one of the largest engineering firms in the state.
Yeah.
And they have experts in every field. And I'm sure that whoever did this report and this proposal
Yeah.
is as well-versed in this field as you could ask them to be.
They have licensed state remediation
Yeah.
experts on
And I'm
staff.
sure
Yeah.
they've done projects like this elsewhere, so this isn't the first time.
Well, it's possible they are. This is a very expensive proposal, 72,000. It goes above the quotes that we have for a open bid.
Okay, well, nobody's arguing.
Okay.
Well,
The
we'll
next
keep-
step
yeah.
is to get an answer from the nature center.
I was just
Okay.
gonna say, keep in mind that they're responding to the questions that were asked of them, and we didn't ask those questions.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, the next item is something I asked to put on, for discussion here is, we're in, the time has come to replace our message board. The message board that's on the corner of, Tenafly Road and River Edge Road. It's really an asset to the town, and the new one probably will cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000. So the question I'd like to put on the table is, if we can find a sponsor to pay for that, and in return have a small advertisement underneath it, nothing on the screen itself, it's not like they're gonna get a rotating ad. But I'm sure you've seen scoreboards, you've seen, if you go to past the message board on the, in Bogota, although that message board is right in front of a bank and the bank paid for it and has their ad on it. But if we could possibly get one of the banks or one of the car dealers, those would be the obvious choices to pay for the message board in return for that ad being there, as long as the message board is there. Would you be willing to do that? And let me explain the process first before you say yes or no. My intent would be to send a letter out to every business of size in the town stating that if somebody has an interest, the first company that suggests that they would do it would get the ad, because I don't wanna like go to DNC Honda and then find out that BMW is upset because they didn't have a chance to bid on it. But the question for the table is, do you wanna go that route?
So, I'm okay going that route, I think. I would just like a little clarity and understanding, so if we have three different individuals, three different businesses that would like to do this, the highest bidder would get it,
No,
so.
he said
You know,
first.
The first bidder, or we can put 3 message boards up. We can put them
He's
up,
saying the
and the
first-
second one up
first to
somewhere else in town.
respond.
First to respond.
First, I would say first to respond, that makes the most sense. Well, Max?
So, there are two questions in my mind that I need to understand before we do that. First of all, what is the reason for replacing? I understand that the board is old, but does it do the functions, can it add, basically put the ads that we need? And if that can be done, then maybe we can look at just a maintenance agreement.
It's
The-
getting
the-
to the point
the board
where,
has passed its,
yeah,
its life.
it's past its useful life, it's
And
it-
11 years old.
If you
So
look
it-
at
it-
it,
Useful
so
life
that's
is
the-
10 years old, we are spending
Okay,
a
so
lot of
the
money
answer is that the existing board
on
is cannot be,
pieces.
yeah, cannot,
Yeah.
alright, so now if the existing board cannot be used, which is basically one of it, we had a long time, we had a proposal like you have asked basically to think about with another company which was modified, basically they wanted to have a time slot on the panels and replaced and put advertising board in town, and we have decided not to do that.
Yeah, keep in mind, it wasn't just a time slot, basically, they would give us the boards, and then they would sell advertising.
Yeah.
And the way it was gonna work out, there was gonna be more advertising than
Exactly.
announcements.
But the idea is that we're still gonna have an advertising.
No,
We-
no,
we're just,
No,
you
is
know,
there a name on it?
Yes,
just a name.
underneath
Which
the
is an
message board
advertising.
would say, this message board was
Static.
donated by
Right.
such and such.
yeah.
That's all.
Like the
We-
plantings
right.
around town.
Yeah, I don't have a problem, I didn't have a problem with the previous one or this one because commercial is, to get this one, so I don't have a problem with it.
We'll draft a letter and we'll show it to the council and we'll move forward on it.
Yeah, we've had to invest a lot of money this year in replacement parts, and it's still
Question.
not.
Okay, the only thing that we're gonna
Optimal.
ask is, when we do this, and you're gonna write all this up because you know it, make sure please that we get a commercially viable company
Well, it'll be through bid.
through bid.
Well, for you, but, oh, you mean
So we're gonna go out
for
for
the
bid
message
for
board?
this, even though
Yeah,
it'll be under the
that's right.
40 because
Well, we got a
the-
commercially viable
Contract and such.
company the last time too, and in 11 years,
There's a lot
they've
of
gone out of
companies
business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not the only town in
find
the
out
area
by
that
just looking.
had one of their
Yeah.
message boards. Dan, did you wanna add
Plus,
something?
you know what they do.
So-
I'm sorry, just.
Hold on a
Wait,
second.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dan?
How do we shop for the message board?
I was
Is there like
just-
options of,
We-
Can we get one that's
We-
solar, whatever?
We bid, essentially what we would do, we can discern from the web the options.
Right.
And the types.
The choices
I
you
would
have.
reach out to, municipalities to see if anyone has a current set of specs, so that we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. And then, basically, we would, in our specs, we could modify them to indicate that we're willing to look at different options, but we would specify what those options are.
Nadia,
And I
please.
was just gonna add that,
Yeah.
when you were asking, you can find a lot of information on the internet, but you can't find prices.
Yep.
They
So you
make
get
you
quotes.
contact
Yep.
them
So you
to
want-
get prices.
So this might be
Close.
one of those things that'd be under the threshold, but we'd still go out to bid because of the
absolutely.
complexity.
Definitely.
Max, did you hear that?
I heard it so well.
Okay.
Second question.
Wait.
Wait, second question. Can it be donated completely to avoid the bid process?
Well, when you say donated, somebody would have to, we would still have to have specifications.
Okay.
Next is the Affordable Care Act implementation.
The cover memo I prepared was fairly self-explanatory. I think you've been hearing off and on, about the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, which is also generally known as Obamacare. And, as you may be aware, a couple of provisions that involve large employers, of which we qualify as one, anyone employing more than 50 full-time people, were put off for a couple of years. Well, the delays have come to a conclusion. As of January 2016, we have to do a look back over the employees that have worked for the borough over a 12-month period, and we have to determine what that 12-month period is. And we have to basically identify everybody that we provide health insurance for. If we don't provide health insurance, we have to have documentation proving that the individuals are not eligible. And more importantly, as you see, we now have to give, in addition to our usual forms that we give to employees, we now have to give them a 1094C. Each and every employee will now receive a statement that will basically give them the value of the health insurance that we provide as an employer. And these forms will go to the IRS.
Now, what you're talking about, is there a cost to the borough and or the employee, or just the cost, from the borough perspective, the cost of the time of getting all these reports out?
For the borough, it's the cost of administering the process. We
Who will
have.
do that?
It will be done by our payroll provider, Balance Point, and we are talking to them now about what the cost is going to be. They have provided us at no cost with very, very detailed guidance on what it is we have to do. I mean, keep in mind that they are critical to this process. They maintain our payroll and they have all of our information, all of our financial information about our employees.
Does it include, which I don't think the Balance Point would have it, but how about people that we 1099? Do we have any of those?
We have to look more closely at that, but no, we would be providing the 1099s.
That's on us to do, but you have to do that as well.
We have to do
comply
that
with
as
this.
well, right. Now, this resolution doesn't lock us, this doesn't cost us money. This is part of the overall administrative process.
Mm-hmm.
In order for us to do our analysis, the only thing that the government does give you is the option of determining what that 12-month period is.
That's kind of odd, though.
Well, we are a simple business, not simple-minded, but a simple business in terms of our overall operations. What they've tried to do is they've tried to take into businesses that have much more complex seasonal and temporary employee characteristics than we do. But nevertheless, we still fall under that umbrella as a large employer, so we still have to conduct that analysis. We do have seasonal employees. We have, the
DPW.
bulk of them are in DPW and in rec.
Recreation.
So we don't feel based on what we know about our estimates, that anyone will qualify, but we can't just say that they
Yeah.
don't. We have to go through the process and prove that they don't qualify.
And what will we have to do for people that we 1099? How do we prove that they weren't employees by contract? Do we have to do something further with that component of it?
What we would have to do with 1099 people is, they would primarily be under contract. So their contract would basically be the proof that they are not full-time employees. So,
Okay.
I told you the period that we've, elected is October of last year through September of this year. We feel that it's the most advantageous for us. The period can be different for different organizations. But given the timing of the hiring for our seasonal employees for leaf collection and things of that nature, it also encompasses our summer employees. And the beauty of it is that our seasonal employees for leaf collection will be coming on after October 1st, so we won't have to worry about them again until the next cycle. But this is now, based on the law, gonna be an annual exercise that we have to go through.
Next is the Supreme Court decision on local sign ordinances. Can you do this in 3 minutes or less, Bill?
Oh,
And we
no.
gotta wait.
After the
Except I
cleanup.
just spilled
You made him
my,
nervous.
coffee.
Oh, man, and
No, I was so anxious to address that, because I couldn't
so we're
see
gonna win that one too.
Well, I was the first one to christen the new chairs.
Oh,
I'll clean as I talk.
you have enough
A
napkins?
a
Now,
very,
just like major paper towels.
yeah, a very, very interesting, and somewhat distressing,
He's on
as far as
TV.
I'm concerned, decision by our United States Supreme Court, relating to sign ordinances. It was, I think, a bit contentious in the court itself, because, it was really a fragmented decision. There were only, 2 justices that, agreed, without, yeah, one without comment, but that agreed, without conditions, to Justice Thomas, who wrote the main opinion, even though all of the justices agreed that the particular ordinance that was in question was in fact a violation of free speech rights. And I'll just tell you what they were real quickly. And it deserves a real long discussion, but we don't have the time. Essentially, the court said that if you have to look at the content of the sign to determine like what type of sign it is, if the ordinance that you have differentiates between the treatment of different types of signs, and you have to look at the content of it to even determine what type of sign it is, then that's a content-based restriction that requires strict scrutiny. So it has to be compelling state interest, and narrowly tailored to address the compelling state interest. So in that case, they had distinctions which are interesting in looking at our sign ordinance. They had distinctions they called temporary signs. We have the same thing. They had political signs. Here's my papers here. Which we had the same thing. And then they had ideological signs, which we call them free expression signs. Essentially, our ordinance is very similar to many, many ordinances that towns have. In fact, up until this decision, the court cases supported them, and ours, in fact, followed the model sign ordinance that the league had, and many, many towns have. So many towns, including the state, are going to have to change their laws concerning signs.
Are we?
We
Yes.
will definitely have to. I've circled ours.
Disturbing.
Ours are very similar to the one that was struck down, and it doesn't require that much to change it. It's just that the way we treat temporary signs, political signs, and the free expression signs can't be different. With respect to signs on public property, we still have great control over it. We're talking about restrictions that pertain to signs on private property. As long as the restrictions with respect to, yeah, I know, but my pants are right there too. So as long as our restrictions on public property are evenly even-handed and are not content-based, we can basically do what we want. We can restrict signs on poles, signs in the
Well,
right-of-way.
currently, we have no content-based rules on public property, correct?
Yeah, we don't. Our rules with respect to public property are good. It's just that the political signs, temporary signs, and and they were directional signs that that the church
Church was
had,
using.
that they complained about. Of course, the restriction was much more than hours. You had to remove them within 1 hour of
Yeah,
the end of the event.
Can you put,
I can
you
think,
put something in writing for us to review sooner rather than later? I mean, in the meantime, our sign ordinance is there, you know, I mean,
many,
in my
many, right.
in my experience, we don't have very often have any issues with our sign ordinance, and hopefully that'll remain the same until you bring us up to Supreme Court code.
Yeah, and the restrictions we have, or the place we have for the public display of
Yeah.
signs, I look at that part, that looks good.
Okay.
That looks perfectly
Alright.
consistent with it. And I think that we're gonna have a lot of litigation on this. In fact, since, I think.
Not Tenafly.
Not us, no, I think that towns generally will,
Yeah.
because Justice Alito wrote a concurring opinion, and really, his opinion got the most justices in support of it. And he would have allowed restrictions on temporary directional signs for single events. Like if you put up a sign and it's for bingo on a particular night,
Bingo night.
it's a certain, it's just with respect to one particular event. And he said, listen, there's a reason that you should have restrictions with respect to those type of signs. Get them out of there after the event is over. Of course, he only wrote a concurring opinion. He did have the most support of all the justices because he had Kennedy and Sotomayor agreeing with him. So that was 3. And Thomas only had really just, we had Roberts and Scalia joining, but
Alright, thank
all
you.
the rest of it.
And
I'm
Bill,
going to,
this will give you free 10 cups of coffee, but don't bring it here.
very, very fun. That's my first spill in.
Yeah, you did John
We
Warren.
missed
John Warren's.
John
John
Warren,
Warren.
that's right. we
So if
missed
John was
John
sitting there, it would have been
John's
payback,
fault.
but, you know.
We finished with the to be considered. We have a very small audience tonight. I'm going to ask the council if they'd like to reopen public comment so that the people that are here that want to speak don't feel like they were prevented from speaking.
It's fine.
Yes,
Sure,
that's fine,
absolutely.
yes.
So Mark, you wanted to speak, and then I'll ask if there's anybody else. Jerry, you might want to, you have a suggestion, you can speak during public comment. Try to keep it to 3 minutes. We're sacrificing getting out of here real early.
Thank you. Mark Feldman, 133 Lowwood Drive. I didn't see the written request from the Nature Center regarding the dredging of Fister's Pond, but, so I don't know what their rationale was in approaching the council, and I got the impression from the newspaper, might have been wrong, that there's some sort of assumption on their part, and perhaps on the council's part, that if there is a need to dredge the pond, that somehow it's the council's responsibility, since it's public land, to deal with the problem. So I did a little research in the lease between the Nature Center and the borough, and I just want to quote you one sentence from it, 2 sentences. It says, "Nothing in this lease agreement shall be construed so as to obligate the borough to expend public funds for the maintenance of the demised premises during the term of this lease. The primary financial burden attendant to maintenance of the park and all structures therein shall lie with the TNC." That seems pretty clear to me. So I'm asking you, and I guess through Dan, asking the Nature Center Association, where is the presumption, or why are we presuming that the town actually needs to get involved with this at all? Not to say that it might not be desirable if they make a good case, but certainly according to the lease, I think it's clear it's not the town's obligation. And
Well, I
don't know
think-
if the rest of you were aware
I think
of
we
what
all,
it said in the
I don't
lease.
think anybody here, Mark, feels that we are obligated to do it. The question becomes, A, is it necessary or feasible to do it, and B, then the question becomes, how is it going to be financed? I think they came to us, and our response to them, correct me if I'm wrong, was, we'll listen to what it's gonna cost, and then we'll decide how to pay for it, but not necessarily gonna come out of taxpayer dollars.
They asked
Some
for,
come.
they asked for a partnership with the
Yeah.
town.
Right, and not necessarily, in my mind, a partnership is not necessarily 50-50.
Financial.
Right, but it is somewhat of a break in
demand.
tradition, because the preamble to the lease basically says that they are required to maintain the park
We
during
hear
the
you.
tenure of the lease. So it's, the onus to me is on them to prove why the borough and through the borough, the taxpayers should necessarily be involved in solving this problem.
Okay.
Okay, so, since you were discussing this message board and the whole question of sponsorship, it occurred to me that this is part of a larger picture that is troubling to some of us. And we haven't necessarily raised it in the past, but I think it's something you need to think about before you continue some of the practices of having private business entities and in some cases private individuals make donations to the town in lieu of spending public money for certain things. Now, certainly we all want to save public money if we can, but I think we have to be aware of the public's concern about potential conflict of interest and potential corruption. Now, we know that there are pay-to-play laws. We know that generally they refer to political contributions specific to specific individuals as opposed to contributions to a town or a municipality. But it seems to me that we have to weigh very carefully what we allow even our friends in the business community to do in terms of donating money to the town for various purposes, whether it's for the fireworks or for some sports activities or for a field improvement, et cetera, because it creates in some people's minds the appearance of conflict of interest. Because you have a situation where a firm does something for the town and then there is some sort of implication that there's an implied quid pro quo that when something involving that firm comes before the town, that the town is going to rule in their favor or take into consideration what the donor has done. So I'm not saying this rules out any kind of donations, but I think it should be factored into your decision given the fairly heavy public concern about ethics in government these days.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak? Christine?
Christine Evron, 39 Leroy Street, on the message board. An alternate way of funding it you might consider is that, assuming you get a nice modern color message board, businesses, community groups put up billboards by the basketball courts, 9W. Those billboards generally cost between $400 and $500. With a modern message board, hopefully you wouldn't need one of those billboards. Maybe you could limit it to 4 ads a month and charge $300 for an ad, and that way you'd have ongoing revenue from your message board, and it wouldn't be such a burden on one business. That's my suggestion.
I think you and Mark ought to meet after the meeting and talk about sponsorship.
No, I've already given my quid pro quo. That's the coffee week.
Right.
Okay. And I
Thank
noticed you
you.
didn't
That's the
follow,
play to pray.
you didn't follow our
pay
suggestions
to
about
pay.
eliminating the checklist.
I had the rec department asked to keep it there.
Anybody else care to speak? Joanne?
Well, I didn't come with anything to say, but when you brought up the message board, I thought of something in relation to what you proposed. And that was about that the award would go to the first bidder. And that just seemed a little strange to me, because it's out there now, maybe before, that this may happen. And how do you determine the first bidder? I mean, are they gonna call it 8:31 in the morning,
Well, that would be in the letter, and it'll probably be based on postmark, a letter, a correspondence by postmark.
It just seems like a very strange, weird way to
Well,
conduct
in your spare
this.
time, if you can come with a better idea, I'd love to hear it.
Well, let them submit their idea,
Well,
how much
well-
it would cost, and review their plans instead of
Okay.
doing first bidder. It sounds a little bit
Thank you. Jared?
not good.
What was I gonna comment about?
Just state your name, I'm sorry.
Gerald Niger, 5 Stony Brook Road, Tenafly. Since we're on that subject about the sign, you could have a rotating message, as they do at Yankee Stadium, all these other places, and have more than one sponsor as well. So you're not limited to
We're
just
gonna have to
accepting
increase
one
this.
bid.
The timing of the red light.
I know, we can, believe me, we have enough activity to fill the message board.
But, and if they wanna have their name on there for $100 a month, you know, or whatever it is, but that's just another thought. Hiring of consultants for 53 Knickerbocker Road. There is a news organization that distributes news stories to about 1,000 or more local news outlets, newspapers around the country. And I'll try to get the name for you, but just keep that in mind, because if you're going to have a consultant draw a message, you want to circulate it nationwide.
Absolutely.
At a very end,
There's the name.
yeah, it's free to do that.
Thank you. Okay, administrators report?
Everybody has their link.
Yep.
Okay, the first item, I wanted to bring to your attention was the general ledger situation. As you recall, we had, it had been recommended by the auditor that that was something that we needed to put into place. We did so, and we did have a consultant for, I guess, most of the last couple of years, and that individual, did step down to pursue other interests. So, we do need to catch up. We don't want to allow ourselves to fall too far behind. This has been one of the top priorities for, our new CFO, and she has conducted, I think, an excellent, process of going out and, speaking to her colleagues and finding recommendations. She obtained, several proposals and, went through them. I went through them with her. And her recommendation, as you can see, is for Judy Curran, who is a licensed CMFO and who, as we indicate, is currently working part-time for the borough of Norwood. I have met with Ms. Curran in conjunction with the CFO, and I believe that she has the skills to do this. This is something that she obviously has to do as well for her community. Susan would be involved, primarily to, assist her in, dealing with First Bite, which is the specific software, financial software program that we deal with. One of the things that we were not happy with our previous arrangement was that it was, solely a remote process. And, Ms. Curran, basically shares our philosophy that it is best for, the person who's doing the general ledger to have hands-on, experience, to get to know the staff and to work very closely with the CFO. So she's agreed to, all of the, aspects of the scope of work which we've developed. There was a version attached to, our memo, and we would like to, offer a resolution for the, September 17th council meeting. As you'll see when you receive the resolution, it's still, in preparation, but it lays out the history and everything that we need to do.
And you're very pleased with how the finance office is working at this point, right?
Excellent.
Very. Code enforcement.
Code enforcement. This
Wow.
is, we did not view this as it's not a closed session issue. It is a personnel, but it doesn't involve you to discipline or, you know,
Just an update.
authorization to hire. It's just an update. We reported last week or at the last meeting that we had, 2 candidates. One candidate is still with us, but the second person, after accepting the position, completing all the paperwork, had a change of heart. And, I mean, what can we do? We have to understand that they felt that this would take more time away from their family than they had originally anticipated.
Are we going to the second person?
What we did was we had numbers 3 and 4, and we did interview them, and at this point, we do not think that those are going to work out. Mr. Burns is, on vacation this week, and when he gets back, we've already spoken, we propose to, re-advertise for the, second, position. But in the meantime, I mean, it's far better than it was a couple of weeks ago. The individual that we have, on staff at this time is a, certified code enforcement officer in a neighboring, community, but he works, less hours there than he does for us, so that is working out.
Good.
Alright, administrative employee salary ordinance, this also ties into, the part-time code enforcement. As you recall, when we did a reorganization of the building department a few years ago, in fact, making it the building department, we changed that position to, part-time. The individual, who was currently in that position, was, treated in such a way, that we basically reduced his salary proportionally. Now that we're in a different, situation, now that the individual has left the borough, we have made this a part-time hourly position as opposed to salaried, and we just need to, update the salary ordinance to reflect the current situation. Okay, joint use meeting, we currently have a joint use meeting scheduled for September 28th at 5:00 p.m. In the usual format at the Board of Education. All committee members from both sides of the table have, confirmed. Our attorneys will also be, present at that meeting. Bill has been in contact with the, Board of Education's attorney. The primary subject will be the, swim club parking lot and the leasing arrangements, related to that, as well as, I guess, the maintenance issues, which is really what's driving this. It was also, we were also invited to add other subjects, to the agenda if there was anything else that we wanted to discuss. Mayor Rustin has requested that we, ask the committee to also review the, issue of tennis courts.
Yeah, over the past few months, I've gotten a number of complaints, and they're valid complaints about the condition of our tennis courts over by the Little League Field House by Geisinger Field. There's 4 courts there. They're used for our varsity tennis matches as well as recreation programs. Our varsity tennis programs, both the boys and the girls, are probably the only sport that we compete in that we are at the state level. We've won state championships recently. We compete for state championships. The courts are abysmal. So I want to put that on the agenda. Ideally, I'd like to consider some sort of partnership with the Board of Education, because although we use the courts, the public courts, we do, recreation has classes there, but the schools use them for their varsity, for their matches, interscholastic matches, and the middle school uses them for gym classes. So there's a mutual use, just like the track in Geisinger Field. So I think it lends itself very well to another partnership with the Board of Education. So we'll see what they have to say.
And I would like to.
Mark, you wanted to add something?
Are there any other subjects?
Yeah, the swim club parking lot lease discussion. Is there gonna be a draft lease distributed beforehand?
There will be.
But my follow-up question to that is, we're not gonna show up to look at the lease for the first time and then discuss it there.
Well, we can't
Last
act
time.
on the lease
I mean, for the
on
first
the
time.
next public meeting
Last time.
anyway, because the joint use is after our next meeting.
But you're
Yeah.
drafting the lease, right?
Yeah, but it also requires the Board of Ed to give me their sublease, proposed sublease for the swim clubs. And
You said proposed sublease?
So
Proposed.
let me ask my question a different way.
Proposed,
Yeah.
yes.
Why would they have?
Bill?
Why would they have to propose a sublease?
We're now getting into the
Yeah, now we're gonna
portion
get
that's
into a
for
part
closed
that's
session.
closed
Okay,
session.
so let's
So,
Mark, let's
I
hold
have-
this off for
No,
closed
that's
session.
fine, but I have one, let me ask my question a different way,
Yeah.
okay? What are we there to discuss about the leases if we don't have something to look at and read beforehand?
There's nothing really to discuss. Well.
So why would
Oh, no,
we?
hold it.
We're paying two attorneys.
Hold it. We may, by the time of the next meeting, we may have drafts on both sides to look at. but I don't have that yet because I need some more information from Board of Ed.
Fair enough.
All right, and some things that I've given to him as proposed terms in the lease, he has not gotten back to me on, because he has to talk to
Bill,
So
Board of Ed.
all
Bill,
those-
but what I'm hearing from Mark, and he's exactly right, is we don't wanna go into a joint use meeting and discuss something we haven't seen before.
Right.
I
And that
thought
we
that-
haven't-
Something all
I
of us
thought-
haven't
I
seen.
thought that the joint use,
That's where
Not
I'm
just
going
the
with
joint
that.
hold
use.
it.
Right.
We've already discussed the basic terms that we want to see in the lease. We discussed that already.
We were
Yeah.
very general about that because we were going over their lease to us, which we agreed wasn't
Right,
the
but
way
we
to go.
did, but the
I
main,
thought that
the-
this evening we would discuss more in depth the conversations that you're having
Okay.
with their attorney.
Let's
In closed
leave it
session,
for
yeah.
closed session, we can.
Okay. I just wanna make sure we don't show up at a meeting and have nothing to talk about.
Well, and that's a valid concern.
Or you have so much to talk about that you don't know.
And we can't answer any questions without showing it
Well,
to
the peop-
everyone
the people
first.
who are going to joint use, you're talking about the
That's
joint
it.
use meeting?
The joint use meeting.
Oh, okay, you'll have it well in advance before joint
Okay,
use.
okay.
That's
Yeah.
all.
That was the
I
initial
thought you
question.
meant, no, I thought you meant, no, Mark, I'm sorry, I thought you meant the next public meeting that we have.
No, joint use, it's.
Oh, I confused what you, I didn't know which meeting you were talking
Bill,
about.
what we need to
Let's-
do is have it discussed
Right,
by the
that's,
whole
I
committee
think, I think that's
before-
exactly,
Before
It's
joint
after
use.
17.
okay, let's
So
move
when
on.
I
We'll
show up
discuss
at the,
it closed.
when I show up at the meeting, I have a sense of what
Right.
the Borough Council would like to do.
Exactly.
Okay, you know, listen, I'll distribute it via email, to everybody,
Okay,
It's a Monday.
Prior to the
before,
next
before the
meeting.
next public meeting.
yes.
But
Okay, good.
we're really not gonna have a discussion, time for discussion for
Well, we
next
can do it
week.
under closed,
We can do it in
Alright.
closed session.
at the next
Oh,
public
okay,
meeting.
all right.
Sure.
Let's move on to something simple like energy auction results.
Okay, if you had an opportunity to see the outcome, as you recall, we had Mike Stoller here from MX, and we had two pre-bid analyses offered, one for street lighting and one specifically for all of our other electrical needs in our facilities. And one of the reasons that they are always broken apart is because the main utility companies charge differently. So if you recall, the margin for any additional savings on streetlights was very, very narrow. And the auction results were such that it was not recommended by the analysts that we go into a 2-year contract because of the fact that the rates are actually declining at this point, and they didn't want us to be upside down. Where the buildings are concerned, we're still doing fine. So mainly just wanted you to know that we decided to accept only one of the
Yeah.
bids, only the one for the buildings.
Great.
Okay, micro paving.
Wait, can I ask you a question on that, the Amex part?
Mhm.
So last meeting, yearly estimate is roughly 140, 150 per year. Can we talk with maybe Bob and whoever to look at solar options? Maybe, I mean, if you invest 150 a year, it should pay,
We've
or
looked
not
at,
pay back,
we've,
cut into it.
I guess one of the things we've looked extensively at solar options, okay? Because keep in mind that a lot of this energy efficient lighting that we have now was actually paid for by PSC&G in a very extensive, energy savings program. Program has wound down,
Right.
but, what was determined, keep in mind, the board's buildings are different than ours, they're structured different than ours, they're located more differently than ours. And our buildings just didn't have the proper locations,
They weren't suitable
and they
or
weren't
suitable.
suitable. That's in general.
Right.
So it has been looked at very extensively. For instance, one of I think they said that the only potentially viable location would have been the maintenance garage over at DPW, and even then, it would have needed a new roof before you
Right.
could even, because
Right.
nothing at the present time can hold the load. If you recall, that's part of what the board has had to do,
Yeah,
is replace all the roofs.
Was parking lots part of that, search? Let's say the swim club lot.
The swim club lot was actually considered at one point. I would have to search what the outcome was,
Yeah, we
because it
talked about
was
that.
proposed and it was looked at, but once again, it didn't actually happen.
Didn't meet the criteria.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
The
Cost didn't weigh the benefit.
economics didn't
Yeah.
work, right?
yeah.
Right.
What happens if there was a grant to pay for it?
Well, we
I
would
think-
consider it.
Right, you can look at it again.
Is there like a, do you have like a file of that search?
Anything that's
Right.
we will take.
Keep in mind that at the time that we were talking about it,
Is that when the
the
aspects were
solar, the solar,
Right.
panels in Teaneck were
Collapsed.
collapsing.
Okay.
And they're still
Yeah, they're still on the ground.
on the ground.
I cannot understand it.
Our micro paving program, I received a word just today that, it's going to start, September tenth. Not based on weather, but really just based on the fact that this is paving season and the contractor has to complete some additional, work before he can, we're in the queue. But it has been delayed till September tenth, and the, residents who will be affected are being notified. A block party came up, during the time that, between meetings, so we went ahead and processed that. Both, Bob Culvert and, Chief Chamberlain reviewed it, and, they were both fine, with the request. They do have a rain date of, October 4th. You see the list of events, and, you have additional reports, that are attached. The revenue report is, part of this memorandum. You have a copy of the building report for July and a copy of the engineering report for July. And the police department report was sent to you directly by the chief.
Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on to correspondence.
Before that, there is something that I would like to ask, and because that's something that, I look at the engineering report, and, I'm so much dollars and cents. There is over here basically talking about the generator grant, and basically a recommendation that Mazer has to that this work to be completed, given to ACI. And I need to understand on what basis a $200,000 and so is given to somebody or is recommended to be given. I thought that has to be something that is bidded out or something like
We
that.
did bids.
We did the bids.
Okay, so
That's
it's,
the winner of the bid.
so that's the winner of the bid. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you so much. That's what I
problem.
wanted to understand.
All right, going to correspondence. The first was a letter to us from Rita Heller, talking about 53 Knickerbocker. She did give, I had a meeting, Mark attended, Councilman Zinna attended, with Rita and Kevin Tremble and Karen Noose, in which we discussed possible avenues for trying to save this property. I know they gave me the name of two experts, consultants to call. Neither of them were willing to take on this job for personal reasons, as well as the fact that a particular county application was required to be completed or at least sent in by Thursday, and they didn't feel there was any way that that application could, even not completed, just get done to the point where it was submittable by Thursday. I did speak with Elaine Gold today and had the same conversation. Elaine is with Historic Preservation in the county, and had the same conversation with her. So I know, Mark, you.
I spoke to this gentleman, Clifford Zink.
Right.
He's with a preservation organization, and he's trying to get in touch with an organization called DNR Greenway to see if they can get them interested, because they have, they have open space, they're open space specialists, whatever that may mean. And they know people in North Jersey, so it's really at the point of trying to make contacts and network with the appropriate people that we can get involved here if they're interested.
The next letter is a block party request, which we normally routinely approve, unless anybody else has an issue with it. The following letter is a bike ride, and the normal process is to send that information to Chief Chamberlain to make sure that the route is safe and doesn't create any issues for our community. And this is not the first time that they've done the bike ride, so I know that one of the issues has always been that there's a rest area over at the bike shop on County Road, The number of people resting often overwhelms the facility there. And of course, we actually have somebody that lives across the street from there, so we get a play-by-play on it. So we have been putting more and more pressure on the organizations as well as the bike shop to better handle the expected crowds. Some of these bike rides are very popular. And the last one is a request to waive a false alarm fee. This one is rather an interesting request in that they basically say, yeah, the alarm was malfunctioning and it was fixed. Actually, I don't know what, our tradition is not to waive the fees. And in a particular case where the equipment is malfunctioning, it's maybe what should be recommended is that the company that
Service provider
services
pays
pay for it.
If you read the letter very well, the service, it tells you, it doesn't tell you that the equipment was malfunctioning. The letter from the MCI Eastern Security says the alarm was put in bypass zone. It doesn't say that the equipment was malfunctioning.
Well, the letter to us basically says that the bypass mode was defective. Of
It
course,
doesn't say in this letter.
the company denies that,
Yeah,
so that's between the two of them.
yeah, exactly. I was looking at something else too in this one. I looked at the actual times of all the alarms. And they started in February, then there was one in May, and the two of the latest one were in August 3 and 11, which are probably the ones that are really related to the bypass malfunction. So there were two which were probably not related to that, and there were no charges for that.
The first two are always free.
First two
First two are
Yeah,
free.
but I'm saying there were
Yeah.
which were not related to any,
Yeah.
and then those two. So I thought maybe a half of that might be.
Well, once again, you open up a can of worms because our tradition has been not to waive these fees. If you start waiving half a fee for somebody, believe me, some of the letters we get are
I will agree with whatever the majority does.
is Mark, Dan?
I think we do what we normally do when they have to pay for it.
Okay. Unless anybody has questions about the resolutions?
Yes, I do have a question about the resolution, and that's something that is more of an issue of the policy.
Which one?
It's the one regarding the liquor license.
Letter.
The liquor license.
No, which letter, which resolution is it?
I'm trying to get to that one, whatever.
Yep, it's F.
F. We having a problem in town because we don't have enough liquor licenses.
State
It-
mandate.
Max, before you go anywhere, this is all state statute.
Let me
Yeah,
finish.
These aren't local laws.
Let me finish that. And here is a person that basically is hoarding the liquor license. She has it and she doesn't use it. And we have in town, I think that if we want to have the town attractive and with the restaurants, something should be done about those liquor licenses that basically are kept and not used, and then the restaurants cannot have liquor licenses because the number of liquor licenses is limited by the state statute. And
Well-
here we ask to basically, okay, agree that, yes, she's gonna hoard the liquor licensing continues, she's paid the rent, and then again, the town is suffering.
Well, we don't really have a choice in this matter, but what we can do is there has been movement down in Trenton to change the laws. And if you wanna send a letter down there suggesting that this is one of the changes you'd recommend, then maybe we could do that. But from this perspective, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, this is normal process.
Right.
Yeah,
We
but
can't do
is
anything
there
about that.
something that we can have, some sort of a resolution that in town, if a liquor license is basically withheld for a certain period of time, we ask for a replacement? Is there possible something like that?
No.
We
No.
can't supersede state
So
law.
what happens if we don't pass this resolution? What's the effect?
I think that this is really just sort of like perfunctory because as long as there's nothing that disqualifies this particular, person from having the renewal, you know, and, holding us a pocket license, they can start a lawsuit against us to basically compel us to perform that, purely perfunctory.
The lawsuit is very valuable, and if you try to take it away from them without the ability to do so, you just incur a lawsuit that you're not gonna win. Nadia,
Do
and
we,
then Jan?
do we know which one this one is? Is this where the Chase Bank was? Do you know
I
where
don't
it is?
believe so. The Chase
Amory?
Bank, is owned by Sanzari. That was,
Yeah, okay, that's
and we are
Sanzari's
in the same
license.
situation. I think there's 3 licenses, I know.
Unseated, right?
Right.
When I was down at the league, I did stop by the ABC, had a table, and they said that they do not like to carry somebody who, an unseated license for a number of years, that they actually get on them. And maybe, we need to find out how long this license has actually been unseated.
Assemblyman Johnson did that. I think he works with the ABC. He did
Who
something
does?
for- Assemblyman Johnson, Gordon Johnson, he did something for the
Maybe
Bell
we
Park
could,
recently.
we could follow up on that.
Yeah, that's the whole conversation we should have. What can we do about
Because she
getting?
said to call,
what
the
other-
woman said to call her and follow up, but I didn't have the information on me, and I knew we had 2 or 3 that were unseated.
So to that point, what are the state regulations regarding how long someone can do this for?
I don't think there's a limit on it.
There's none?
How much is a license, like a
Laws
license
a
in town?
day and,
Different amounts in different towns.
Yeah, but what's it in our town, give or take, estimate?
I don't even know do we have the ability to find out what people pay for their licenses?
What's
well,
the
we
last
generally
one?
know because we get a copy of the agreement.
Because I think the last license that was probably transferred was probably the diner.
No, wasn't it the one on the next to Toast, the corner building on River Edge, across from our sign here? He needed a liquor license.
Samaru?
Samaru, he was
Samaru.
buying it from somebody else.
No,
I don't
no,
think it-
on Railroad Avenue, the little, the bodega store there, right, didn't that change hands about a year ago, and they had to
For-
change the liquor license?
Class C. or-
That's
That's a
changed name.
Lazaro?
Okay, but no,
Yeah. Yes.
Lazaro's, but once again, there's different classifications
Yeah.
of liquor licenses.
That's a package
That's a
one.
package store.
Right.
That's package.
Then you have, then you have consumption within, which is, like what the diner has or what some of the Axia would have. I know that TPR purchased a liquor license a few years ago and,
Yep.
and the diner. And I believe Samaru still owns his liquor
They
license.
still own
This
it, but
might
he
even be-
didn't have it when he purchased that business. He bought it from someone else.
Right.
And that's the last one I thought was sold.
So what I think that we should do is, somebody should find out what are the capabilities of finding out how
Something you
can
could do?
we basically influence those people that have liquor licenses that are not used, how can we
Well,
influence them?
the answer is we can't, but maybe the ABC.
That's why I was saying,
Yeah.
can we go to the
Maybe we
ABC?
notice
and-
what-
I'll
Maybe
forward
Bill
it.
could, maybe Bill could ask, Bill will ask.
But I'm fairly
About
certain
an
that
unseated
there's
license.
really is no time limit.
Yeah, but
There
it-
are regulations though about what you.
Well, what if somebody, remember we had a couple years ago, somebody was late paying their taxes and they had to do a special ruling to get their license back. Can't we deny it in that point, when they don't pay their taxes?
Yes.
So
But
if they don't
renew,
keep
they
up,
renew late.
they renew late, then
Well,
we
what
could,
Bill-
then we
what-
could say, no, that's it.
You can deny the liquor license because they were late on their taxes?
Yes.
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 Right, because it's a tax lien.
We agreed to somebody, it was one of these unseated ones, cause I asked the question like 3 years
Can
ago.
you
But I
can
think what
deny it
happens
or you
is
put a
they-
lien on it?
I think you could deny the approval of
The
it, but that
approval
doesn't
of
mean
it.
they lose the license.
Yeah, but once you
They-
deny the approval, there becomes a process whereby.
They couldn't use it, they couldn't use it during that period
Yeah.
of time. It becomes a license that they're holding, but let's say it was active license and they were trying to renew it.
Right, they would have to go down and check.
They'd have to, that would be, their license would be suspended
Yeah.
until they, until they,
Yeah.
if they didn't pay their.
No, we have more than that.
Consumption,
We have package ones and
no
consumption ones.
consumption ones, for
We have more
restaurants.
than that.
So
What about
this
it?
is
How many do you
resolution
have?
F.
We can ask,
Lizette has
Anne Marie,
a list.
ask Lisette to prepare a list of the licenses. I have an old one in my office that she prepared a number of years ago, but I'd like one's up to date. And we get a sense of
They're not
who
numbered
this
until
person
the
is.
meeting. Okay.
And how much they
All
are.
right,
Just
let's
get through.
move on, folks. Max, you're on for the good of the order, demolition of historic
Okay.
properties.
Yes, absolutely. Basically, I scanned the internet to see what do other communities do about their historical buildings. And I found out that there are some resolutions whereby the communities find that this buildings that are 50 years old and more have an interest in preserving them. And as such, two examples of the resolutions were, one, a community has put a moratorium on the actual use of demolition of buildings that are 50 years and older. And another one, basically, they put a request that if a request for demolition comes in front of the commission, and that basically will be our building commission, whatever and the building is more than 50 years old, that the commissioner has a obligation to go and do an investigation with the council if such a building is it's a benefit for the town, and if such a approval for that demolition should be granted. And I think that we are in the same position here, where we have buildings in town that have a historical value, and we should be able to protect our history the same that other communities are protecting their history. And in the issue of time of application, I checked that there is no application for demolition for any of the buildings in town that are 50 years old. So if we adopt this obligation, if there is a request for a building that's 50 years old or older to be demolished, then either first of all, either the moratorium, and secondly, the inspection and decision of the town, if this is in the best interest of the town, will take effect. As such, I'm basically proposing that we look at it and create such a resolution, and that type of resolution would allow us to make sure that our historical buildings will have a good look before they get destroyed, to see if the history of the town should or should not be preserved.
I can
I'm dropping here.
I can comment on it too,
So,
but Mark, go ahead.
Well, then,
go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Bill.
No, I was going to say, as from an initial comment, that both of these particular I'll call them ordinances, one's as a bylaw and I guess the other ones, but both of these laws are certainly within the authority of a municipality to adopt. Or the question really is, and I look at these, and particularly one's New Mexico, and I know New Mexico still has a time of decision rule, by the way. They haven't yet adopted a law. I mean, the state hasn't adopted a time of application rule. But nevertheless, this, if you're going to talk about this with respect to a particular property, and we've been discussing through Knickerbocker, this is no different than a suggestion that it be that particular property be deemed historic, and therefore have the historic the regulations that pertain to historic buildings apply to it.
I completely disagree with you now.
Max, let him speak.
Okay,
I'm letting it speak.
so I have my doubts that even adopting a regulation such as this would have any impact upon that particular property.
Okay, so
I obviously can't say that I'm not a court, so, but I would say that it's very likely that we would have to have the question of whether or not it in fact applies to that property determined by a court.
the court might make the decision if that applies or not. But the idea is, this is a property, basically a request that we preserve the history of the town, and if there is a building that is more than 50 years old, basically look at that type of building should be done by the pertinent part of it, to see if it is benefiting the town in destroying that type of property. And since the time of the application is what you're basically saying, it's in it. There is no application at this moment in time for a demolition of any building that is 50 years old or older. So this resolution will take precedent against any other type of
So
any other. And
So you're doing this primarily to, in your mind, to try and save 53 Knickerbocker?
no, I'm doing it to save every building that is 53 years, 50 years old
My
and
house
older.
is 50 years old.
So
So
if,
you're telling me that if I wanted to demolish my house, there's a possibility that a group of people that weren't even elected officials, these are people that are appointed, could tell me that I can't demolish my house until they have a study which may or may not last for who knows long, or for example, that Charlie Brown's could, this is a perfectly good case, Charlie Brown's could not be demolished, it's been vacant for 5 years now, so you're gonna leave that vacant for as long as, and if they say, you know, we have in process now the opportunity for the Historic Preservation Commission to designate properties historic. They recommend it, the mayor and council approves it, and if we approve it, then
well,
they can't demolish it.
we tried to approve it, and basically we were told that that's gonna be and we have the votes to approve it tomorrow, but basically that we were told that that will create a legal issue. This is not a resolution that will create a legal issue.
Oh, are you serious?
Yes,
Yeah, I'm
I am
sorry.
serious.
With due respect, you're absolutely wrong.
Absolutely wrong might be, but we're gonna have to apply. If we're looking over here at the time of application, which is what Bill was saying, there is no application for demolition at this
But
moment
there's
in
been
time.
an approval of a subdivision.
A subdivision
Which
is
lays
different.
out the full scope of the project.
Well, you know, I don't know, these particular ordinances, as I see them, appear to be zoning ordinances.
Right,
As opposed to general regulation ordinances. The procedure to adopt a zoning ordinance, first, if you think you're gonna apply it to the whole town as opposed to a particular zone,
right.
that's one thing. But changing a zoning law that's going to have an impact on what an individual property owner can do, if you just say it's the entire town, essentially, we'd have to notify everybody in the whole town
Anybody who has a house over 50
who has a
years.
house over 50 years old.
That's probably 60% of the town,
And, you know, it
easily.
would have to be referred to the planning board, obviously, you know, zoning ordinances have to first go to the planning board for a recommendation back whether or not it's consistent with the master plan, and obviously the governing body can adopt over their, you know, over their
Well,
objection.
the
But-
one in New Mexico specifically indicates that this only applies to commercial and historic zones that are already
Right.
designated.
Those particular ones I see were limited to specific zones.
Right.
Yeah, the one in Coral's, every town has a interest in preserving their history. And those are resolutions that do that. And they were not challenged in court, I could not find a single place where this one, and I'm sure when they passed them, they didn't pass them just to make people have problems, they passed to protect their history. And that's the reason that they passed them. And here's the problem over here, are we gonna do that or not?
Well,
We can put a lot of words about, yes, we wanna do that, but when it comes to doing it, you have to do it.
Well, I Googled New Mexico and to see what type of law they have, time of decision versus time of application rule. And right now, in July 2015, there was a lawsuit filed because a town passed an ordinance that would block the development of a piece of property that,
Yeah,
which
but
is
it was
approved.
not about the historic, about those specific ordinances.
Mark, you want to handle it?
So for practical purposes, legal issues aside, you know, I'll go in no particular order here. When we've had conversations about taking a two-family zone and making a one-family zone, it never happens because the public and the residents who own those houses want nothing to do with that.
Right,
In other words, their argument is, I bought this house, it was a two-family house. Now you're telling me, it was zoned for it. Now you're telling me I can't tear it down and go from a one-family to a two-family after the fact. And we've got the same thing here. to me, this would be like an enormous governmental overreach, telling people that, hi, if we think your house is historic, you don't get to tear it down. Even though you bought it X amount of years ago, even though you own it, even though you're paying the taxes, we get to dictate what you get to do with the house. So, and we do have a process in place for declaring things historic. 53 Knickerbocker didn't get voted that way. We've never had a vote for the county road to Charlie Brown's house. And 53 Knickerbocker, again, it's private property, right? So we've been talking about this for a year, and one of the biggest things is, if we wanted to make this place
Would you
historic.
wanna vote on that tomorrow?
No, but it's not about that, no, the
Because
issue is,
we're willing to do a vote tomorrow, we'll do a vote
it's
tomorrow.
not about that, you know,
We
we
don't
have
have
this.
a meeting tomorrow.
Let me
Yeah,
finish
well-
let me finish my point. You know, if we want 53 Knickerbocker to be historic and save forever, then we need to decide to write a check for $7 million to buy it,
Right.
because we can't have the private property owners pay the bill for what we believe, you know, we have to put our money where our mouth is if we wanna do these things. So, and as a side note, just to ramble on about it, right, since we've been talking about it for a year, and members of the Historic Preservation Committee have, a couple of individuals have decided to donate $1,000 each to help fund some applications to do something about this. But I kind of looked at that as, well, that's very generous of them, okay? $2,000 isn't anything compared to what the value of that property is. And when I see no dollars being put to something, that tells me there's no real support to do what people are talking about they'd like done. And so it just,
Well, the only thing I could tell you, Max, without fear of being wrong, is as Mark said, when we proposed an ordinance that would impact two-family homes, we had the room was filled with owners of two-family homes. If you wanna fill the room, we're gonna need a bigger room, first of all. But with the owners of every house that's 50 years old or older, you're gonna have a real, a firestorm. We have a process in place. Unfortunately, the process started too late in this particular case. That's not to say I personally, I haven't given up. I'm hoping to have another.
You voted
couple
for
of-
the subdivision when 3 people voted
We
against.
we had no choice.
Yes, the 3
we
people
had-
had a choice.
No, we didn't have a choice.
Mark voted against it.
Well, you know something, it's very easy to say no, because you know, A, it's gonna pass, and B, if you don't care,
So he just
that,
wasted
that,
his vote.
that the no,
I
that,
made my opinion known about some environmental issues that I agreed with Kevin Trumbull about.
that the no is going to bring on a lawsuit that your own attorneys, now, maybe you wanna get a new attorney, your own attorneys say you can't win the lawsuit. So if you want to incur those legal expenses, a taxpayer expense, so be it. And if that's what the majority wants to do, we'll have legal fees. The good news is we haven't had such legal fees in a long, long time here. The last time we did this, it cost the borough $500,000 on a little thing called the error because it was handled improperly. So let's not go that route again.
I don't know, it's cheap for a lawsuit.
All right, so anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Because I have a couple of things.
Wait, one question.
Sure.
What was the name, what was the word you used for that liquor license? That wasn't being
It's
used?
unseated,
Unseated.
unseated.
Okay,
Pocket license.
we have
Pocket license is the other word.
we have a committee called
Pocket license.
the Access for All Committee. The Moldovers, John and Becca, moved out of town. They occupied 2 seats. I have 2 names for those seats. One is Andrew Pecorella, who was on the committee for many years. It actually was the chair. And the other is Stacy Goldberg, who has shown a great interest. We still have 2 vacancies on that committee, so if anybody else knows of anybody that would like to participate, that would be wonderful. The next meeting of the Access for All Committee is Wednesday, September the 16th, which is the day before our next council meeting.
Do you know Larry Lamb?
I do not.
Reach out to him.
But talk to him and let me know if you give me contact information if he's interested. The next meeting for the Access for All Committee is Wednesday, September the 16th. Tony Barzolato is the liaison. He will be out of town that day. I would do it, but I have a planning board meeting that night, and so does Mark. Would either of the 3 of you be willing to sit in on that meeting? Dan?
I'm sorry, you missed that again.
September 16th, it's a Wednesday night, Access for All Committee.
Yeah, I'll go that one.
Thank you.
September 16th. What time?
8 o'clock. There is a walk against breast cancer on Sunday, October the 18th at Overpeck Park. If anybody is interested in walking, please let me know.
That's a big one, by the way, about 25,000 people.
We'll get you right up front.
What date?
Sunday, October 18th.
18.
We got this from Loretta Weinberg's office. Has anybody not seen these?
I have not seen it.
No.
I'll pass them
Neither
along. Unfortunately, this is next Wednesday night, which conflicts with the planning board meeting, but if you know anybody that, I've sent this to our transportation committee.
That was the block.
Legal?
Let me see if I think that might be it. That's it for me, so unless there's anything else, you wanna read the closed session?
Close. Sure.
16.
Resolved in compliance with NJSA 10:4-12, Mayor Council of Borough of Tenafly will go into closed executive session, discuss the following matters, and they're both legal matters, attorney-client privilege matters. The first is just a discussion on, update on the lapse litigation. And the second is discussion of the swim club leases that, with respect to the parking lot, and talk about that a little bit in open, but.
We have a
we'll
third.
continue.
It wasn't online here, but I noticed it's sitting at our places. We were recreating.
Personnel issue.
Personnel issue.
Oh,
Personnel.
right, the personnel issue
We
with
didn't get the
respect to
update.
recreation.
That's why we.
Employee. This will be taking the meeting and release of the public and timely matters resolved. After this closed executive session, the mayor and council reconvene in this
Can we have 30
committee room
seconds?
to adjourn this public meeting.
Absolutely. Take a minute.
So moved.
We'll see.
It'll take as long as it takes.
Yeah.
Don't come back too soon.
Do you remember, Peter, do you remember the old president